The courtroom felt more like a freezer than a place where your life gets dissected in front of strangers. The judge's gavel had barely struck when my soon-to-be ex-wife leaned back in her chair with a smug little grin like she'd already scored the win. She crossed her legs slowly, flashing those overpriced designer heels and tapping them softly against the floor like she was bored of the whole affair. "Your Honor," she cooed, running a glossy fingernail down her cheek, "let's not sugarcoat it. My husband," she turned to look at me with that same tired disdain, "he's like an old farm truck. Dependable, predictable, and ridiculously easy to ride." A couple people stifled gasps. Her attorney chuckled under his breath. The judge barely blinked, just knocked his gavel once to hush the reaction. I stayed still. Didn't blink. Didn't move. Because this was theater to her, one last chance to throw dirt before the curtain dropped. And I wasn't going to give her the encore she wanted. She had been the one to call time on our 8-year marriage. One day I was her rock, the next I was her rut. She wanted adventure, someone evolved, someone who made her feel like more than just a wife. And instead of just walking away clean, she dragged me into court like I was some mess she had to clean up. She'd already claimed the house, yeah, the one I spent 5 years building from the ground up. She clawed for half my business, even though she'd never lifted a finger for it. Now, at this final hearing, she was still coming for blood. And sitting in the back row like this was some midday soap opera was her new guy, a polished legal shark with perfect hair and that Wall Street arrogance. He looked at me like I was a relic. He hadn't even bothered hiding their affair. I caught them in our bed. Our sheets. My life. But this hearing wasn't the end. Not for me. It was just the setup. Her lawyer, a guy who looked like he ironed his smile along with his suit, stood and straightened his tie. "Your Honor, my client only wants assurances that Mr. Hayes can maintain alimony over time. She made considerable lifestyle compromises during the marriage, and she's entitled to a fair outcome." Lifestyle compromises. That was rich? Judge Reynolds leaned forward, peering over his glasses. "Mr. Hayes, anything you'd like to add?" I nodded once. Gripped the edge of the table. This was it. Without saying a word, I began to unbutton my shirt. Slowly. Purposefully. I could feel the room shifting, curiosity replacing smugness. Even the judge leaned slightly forward. 1 button. 2. 3. I peeled the shirt off, let it slide from my shoulders, and stood there, letting the silence speak for me. That's when the gasps really started. Gone was the man she used to overlook, the guy who had buried himself in bills, sacrifice, and loyalty. In his place stood someone else entirely. I'd spent months breaking myself down and building back up. Hours in the gym. Late nights pushing through pain until it became just another part of the routine. The stress weight, the fatigue, it was all gone. Now there was definition. Strength. Scars. Evidence of the battles I'd fought, alone, in silence. And right over my heart? Fresh ink. A tattoo so bold it still glistened slightly. A chained workhorse, breaking loose, mid-charge. Unmistakable. My wife stared, stunned. Her mouth opened just a little, eyes wide like she was seeing me for the first time and realizing I was no longer the man she thought she could trample. And just like that, the performance shifted. Because now everyone knew who had really won. Her lawyer tried to recover fast, clearing his throat and straightening his tie. "Your Honor, I fail to see how this display has any legal relevance." I didn't let him finish. My voice? I said, cold, deliberate. Might not be loud, but it's sharp enough to cut steel. I turned to the judge, keeping my stance firm. "You want to talk about sacrifice? Fine. Let's talk. For 8 years, I gave this marriage every ounce of my energy. I took extra shifts so she could figure things out. Paid for her luxury lifestyle, spa weekends, 5-star vacations, wardrobe upgrades, even surgeries she claimed were investments in herself. I signed half my company over to her because I thought we were building something together." I turned back toward her, and for the first time, I saw her mask start to slip. Her face lost color like someone had just flipped a switch. "And how did she thank me?" I nodded toward the man lounging in the back row, still smug but now sitting a little straighter. "With him." Gasps again. Her lawyer tried another objection, but this time the judge raised his hand to silence him. "Let him finish." I gave a grateful nod. Then I reached down and grabbed a thick envelope from the chair beside me. When I dropped it onto the table, the thud echoed across the courtroom. "This," I said, tapping the folder, "isn't just about betrayal. It's about theft. Inside are detailed records, bank transfers, receipts, internal business documents. Proof she's been siphoning funds, falsifying expenses, and funneling money into accounts I didn't even know existed." She opened her mouth to speak. Closed it. Tried again. Nothing came out. And because of that, I continued, locking eyes with her. "I'm not just rejecting her alimony demand. I'm filing a lawsuit. For fraud. And damages. The courtroom erupted in a buzz of whispers. Her lawyer started flipping through his papers like a man trying to find a fire extinguisher mid-blaze. She just sat there stunned, pale, and still. The arrogance? Gone. The smug smile? Nowhere in sight. What replaced it was something I hadn't seen from her in years. Fear. And we weren't done yet. This is just the beginning, I said, letting every word hang in the air like a loaded trigger. You wanted to play dirty? I came prepared. Her nails dug into the defense table. Her face was crumbling. The facade she'd worn so confidently for months was unraveling in real time. Her lawyer, now visibly sweating, stammered, Your Honor, we need a recess to review these. Judge Reynolds raised his hand again, cutting him off. Not yet. Then he turned to me. Mr. Hayes, you're claiming this evidence proves Mrs. Hayes committed financial fraud? Yes, Your Honor, I said, voice steady despite the thudding in my chest. Verifiable proof. I flipped open the envelope and laid out the documents like cards on a table. Itemized reports. Copies of wire transfers. Fake business invoices. Every single transaction traced directly to her name. Page after page. It had taken months of work, months of digging when I could have just walked away and let her keep everything. But I hadn't. I'd focused. Got help. Hired a forensic accountant to trace every shady dollar. The findings? Devastating. She had been quietly draining our accounts, using business funds to finance her new life. Tropical getaways filed as client retreats. Designer bags and heels logged as professional tools. Even a condo, paid for in part with company money, set up in her name, presumably her launch pad for life post-marriage. And every single page bore her signature. Judge Reynolds scanned the stack, his expression unreadable. But I caught the subtle shift in his eyes, focus, suspicion. Mrs. Hayes, he said finally, peering over his glasses, do you have a response to these allegations? I turned to her again, not with anger, but something colder. Calm. Certain. She'd always been quick with words. Not today. This is nonsense, she said finally, her laugh brittle, fake. He's making all of this up. I would never. I cut in, quiet but razor sharp. Every one of those transactions has your name on it. The signatures match. The timelines check out. And the accounts. I pointed to the final page. Already frozen. The courtroom was silent again. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the workhorse anymore. I felt like the one holding the reins. I pulled another paper from the stack and slid it across the polished oak. This, I said, is an email where she personally directed our accountant to move funds from the business account into what she labeled her personal reserve. Her face blanched like someone had flipped the light switch. You hacked into my email, she whispered, her voice so thin it barely reached me. No, I said, steady and unflinching. I accessed the company communications legally, my company. The one you tried to siphon dry. Judge Reynolds exhaled through his nose, clearly losing patience. Mrs. Hayes, he said, voice clipped, these are no small claims. Your legal counsel will be given time to respond. But at this point, I'm inclined to hold off on any alimony decisions until we thoroughly review these financial discrepancies. Her lawyer was now flipping through his case files like a man looking for an emergency exit. But there wasn't one. Not this time. Not for her. And I still wasn't done. I turned slightly in my chair, locking eyes with the man who had once watched my humiliation like it was primetime entertainment, her new boyfriend, the hotshot attorney. His smug look had melted into something closer to dread. His foot tapped uncontrollably, and his jaw was tight. Your Honor, I said, rising slowly to my feet. There's one more piece of evidence I'd like to submit. Reynolds nodded for me to proceed. From my pocket, I pulled out a small USB drive. This contains audio recordings, I explained, conversations between Mrs. Hayes and Mr. Brooks. I nodded toward the boyfriend. His eyes narrowed, lips parting slightly. In those recordings, they're discussing how to financially drain me before she filed for divorce. My wife jerked toward me like I'd slapped her. What? That's illegal. He can't record private conversations. I kept my gaze on the judge. All recordings were made inside my home in a state with one-party consent. Fully legal. Reynolds raised a brow, then motioned for the bailiff to retrieve the drive. We'll review it, he said. And if it says what you claim, Mr. Hayes, then this case just escalated beyond a typical divorce proceeding. Her boyfriend turned ghost pale. He sat back, face stiff, legs crossed tight like he was already trying to disappear into the bench. And that's when it hit me, he didn't know. She hadn't told him she was planning to take him down with her. Perfect. I leaned in slightly, just enough that only she could hear. You thought you were outsmarting me, I whispered. But the truth is, you were outmaneuvering yourself the whole time. Her jaw clenched hard, grinding like she was chewing through concrete. No longer the workhorse. I was the reckoning. Judge Reynolds took a breath and sat back. Given the seriousness of the claims brought forward today, he said, I will be freezing all assets, bank accounts, business shares, joint holdings until this investigation is complete. She spun toward him, eyes wide in disbelief. Frozen, she repeated, her voice cracking. Yes, he said. Effective immediately. No funds may be moved or accessed by either party. Her hands trembled now. She turned to her lawyer, desperate. Fix this, she hissed, panic lacing her voice. He looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Rubbed his temples. Said nothing. I sat back down slowly, feeling the weight of control settle over my shoulders, not heavy this time, but solid. Balanced. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just watched the truth finally hit her full force. She had walked into court thinking she'd leave rich, triumphant, untouchable. Instead, she left with nothing. And her boyfriend? He was already checking his watch. He looked like a man cornered, eyes darting toward the exit like he was ready to vanish into the drywall. I glanced over at him and let a small, knowing smile creep across my face. He wouldn't last. Men like him never do once the illusion of luxury vanishes. The moment the money runs out, so does the affection. But that wasn't my concern anymore. That was her problem to figure out. Because for the first time in what felt like forever, I had already won. The only sound in the courtroom was her breathing, rapid, uneven. That carefully polished exterior? Gone. Her calm? Cracking under pressure. The judge's order to freeze all assets had shattered the neat little future she had stitched together behind my back. And still, I wasn't finished. While her lawyer scrambled to form a coherent response, babbling something about financial reassessments and procedural delays, I turned toward the man who helped dismantle my life, her new guy. The corporate wolf she thought was her upgrade. His smugness from earlier? Gone. Now he just looked nauseous. I leaned back, letting my stare settle on him with just enough weight to make him squirm. Your Honor, I said calmly, before we break, I'd like to make an additional request in light of the financial fraud investigation. Judge Reynolds looked up. Proceed, Mr. Hayes. I kept my eyes locked on her boyfriend. As you'll see in the documentation we submitted, several fraudulent transactions appear to be linked directly to Mr. Brooks. He flinched. What? He blurted, far too quickly. The sweat at his temple said everything. Judge Reynolds flipped through the pages, then glanced toward him. Mr. Brooks, can you explain why your name is listed in these records? Jessica turned so fast her chair creaked. She hadn't seen this coming. She dragged him into her mess, confident he'd be her partner in crime. But he'd clearly never looked too closely at what she was actually doing. I have no idea, Brooks stammered. I raised a document. Oh, you don't? I said with a raised brow. Because this file shows multiple wire transfers into a personal account in your name. One of which is labeled as a consultation fee under legal services. Judge Reynolds adjusted his glasses. Is that accurate, Mr. Brooks? He opened his mouth. Closed it. Swallowed. I don't handle personal accounting. I cut in exactly. That's the trap. You never looked. You just cashed the checks. And now it looks like you knowingly accepted payment from a fraudulent account tied to my company. He turned a shade paler. That's when it hit him. For a lawyer, just the appearance of criminal involvement is enough to end a career. His head whipped toward her, not with love, not with sympathy. But betrayal. Jessica, he said through gritted teeth, what the hell did you drag me into? She panicked, shaking her head. Wait, no, this isn't what you think. I needed to move some money around. You know that. I had to. The judge let out a long, tired sigh. Given the widening scope of these issues, I'm ordering a full forensic audit of both parties' financial activity. If Mr. Brooks was knowingly involved, he may be subject to additional legal consequences. Brooks shot out of his chair. This is insane. I'm not. You will sit down, Mr. Brooks, Judge Reynolds snapped, his voice sharp enough to slice tension. Or I'll hold you in contempt. Brooks froze. Jaw clenched. His career now dangled by a thread. And Jessica, she finally got it. The money? Gone. The escape plan? Shattered. Her so-called upgrade? Seconds from walking out. I leaned back again, calm, collected, and watched the storm hit her in full force. 15 minutes later, the judge called for recess. And I just sat, watching the final pieces fall apart. She clutched at Brooks' arm as they stood, desperation leaking from her voice. Please, baby, listen to me. I didn't mean for this. It's just paperwork, it's business. We can fix it. He yanked his arm away like she burned him. You absolute idiot, he hissed. Do you even realize what you've done? Her eyes filled with tears. She blinked rapidly, whispering, "But you said we'd be together." He didn't answer, because he was already halfway out the door. "I said a lot of things," he muttered, running a hand through his hair like he might just lose it right there in the hallway. "But I didn't sign up to be part of a federal fraud case." She gasped like the air had been knocked out of her lungs. I stood up, adjusted my cufflinks, and took a slow step past them. As I passed, I leaned in just enough for only her to hear. "Looks like you overplayed your hand, sweetheart." She spun on me, fury written all over her face. "You think this makes you a man?" She spat, her voice cracking under the weight of everything crashing down around her. I didn't flinch. Just gave her a slow, calm smile. "No," I said, slipping on my jacket. "It makes me free." And I walked away, leaving her standing there, hollow, humiliated, without a dollar, without backup, and without a plan. A week later, a text came in from a number I didn't recognize. "Jessica, I made a mistake. Jessica, please, I just want to talk. Jessica, we can fix this." I didn't get angry. I didn't even feel bitter. I laughed. Not a cruel laugh. Not a vengeful laugh. Just a clean, light, unburdened laugh, the sound of finally letting go. Then I deleted the messages without replying. She had already heard everything I ever needed to say. The moment I hit delete, something inside me lifted. For the first time in years, I felt free. She used to own every piece of my life, my thoughts, my energy, my love. Yeah? She was just a name on a case file. A warning sign. A scar I no longer tried to hide. And the fallout? It wasn't over. The public shame came quick. The financial audit triggered a full-scale investigation into every shady transaction. The court wasn't playing around. And the evidence? Damning. She'd embezzled from our business, rerouted funds, and buried it all under fake labels and fake confidence. This wasn't about losing alimony anymore. She was staring down possible criminal charges. Then came the collapse of her so-called new life. Brooks, her knight in shining Armani, jumped ship 3 days after the hearing. His law firm issued a public statement disavowing him. Ethics violation. Zero tolerance. He resigned before they fired him. And Jessica? She was left with nothing. No man. No money. And no mess to hide behind. I should have expected it, and honestly, I did. Late one night, after a long workout, I heard a knock. It was soft. Hesitant. I almost ignored it. But then I thought, let's see it through. I opened the door. And there she was. Jessica Hayes. Not the woman I married. Not the woman who used to hold my world in her hands. Just a hollow version, makeup too perfect, smile too forced, eyes too desperate. The jewelry was gone. Probably sold. Her voice was small. "Hey," she said, trying to sound casual. "Can we talk?" I leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed. "About what?" She shifted on her feet. "Look, I know things got out of control. We had some good years, right?" I said nothing. "I miss you," she said finally, her voice cracking a little. "Do you?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. She swallowed. "Yeah. I made a mistake. I lost sight of things. I let the silence stretch between us." Watched her squirm. Then, just like that, the mask cracked. "Damn it, can't you stop being so smug for 5 seconds?" she snapped. "I'm trying here." There she was. The real her. The one who'd mocked me in court. The one who thought loyalty was weakness. "You don't miss me," I said calmly. "You miss the life I gave you." Her mouth opened like she wanted to argue. But she couldn't. Because she knew I was right. Her voice broke. "I have nothing. No money. No one. I just need a little help. Just until I figure things out." The audacity. I didn't yell. I didn't insult her. Instead, I pulled out my wallet. Slipped out a single dollar bill. She stared at it, confused. "What the hell is this?" I smiled. Consider it my final act of generosity. Her face flushed. "You son of a..." I shut the door. And that was the last time I ever saw Jessica Hayes.